Oh, hey. How you doing, guys and gaggers? It's me, Patrick, coming to you from the middle of Kumamoto in my sweet little hometown called Mifunemachi. And I'm here to talk to you about monsters. Uh, my main theme is monsters in manga. And to get to that, I do want to get to that, believe me, uh, I want to lay the groundwork by going through the 7 theses of the groundbreaking essay, Monster Culture 7 Theses by Jerome Cohen. Came out in a book called Monster Theory in 1996 and has been considered the cornerstone of monster theory since that time, even though a quarter of a century has passed. There have been some additions, there's been some extensions to it, and hopefully through this exercise and through more exercise where I apply those theses to different works, I will be able to extend it even more in my own way. So, Thesis 3, the monster is the harbinger of category crisis. Now, this is a very interesting one, and it talks about how basically how monsters avoid easy categorization. And they shy away from the normal, the status quo. They threaten established norms, basically, because of their existence. Just by existing, people who think that everything is in the world is black and white suddenly have to go, what do you mean there's grayness? What does this sound like to you? Does it sound like this could be applied to some current social conundrums that are being discussed sometimes very hotly every day in certain areas? Sounds to me, especially surrounding gender. So another thing is the monster turns its back on what are considered like nature's rules, and we're talking about things like gravity and such, rules that we take to be scientific fact. They challenge those as well. So that's why the monsters are considered scary, is because they do challenge the things that we grew up holding dear. And the good thing about that is that a lot of those things need to be challenged, and a lot of those rules need to be broken for us to become a more enlightened society and to move on from like outdated modes of thought. So when I first read this thesis, the first thing that came to mind to me was the 1958 movie starring good old Steve McQueen, The Blob. And The Blob is an interesting movie for a lot of reasons. I recently found out that it was actually an independent movie. And Steve McQueen was actually offered 10% of the take for a lesser, a lesser payday. And he said, well, I got bills to pay. I got to pay the rent. And so he took the higher pay, but he lost out because The Blob ended up being a huge hit. And according to some sources, the success of The Blob gave other independent studios the kind of impetus they needed to try their own thing. And so it's kind of, I don't think it's the birth, but I mean, apparently it is an important moment in independent theater, independent movie history. Now, why I thought about the blob is because some other things that are mentioned uh, in the theses is that the blob can, well, like it's like also kind of represents Thesis 2. These always often tie together because in Thesis 2 the monster always escapes, and the blob can get into any old space that you think is safe, like the home or the movie theater. There's a great movie theater scene in the blob. And any old space that you think is safe, the blob, because of its malleable, its liminality, it's neither solid nor liquid, it can get in anywhere. So the fact that it doesn't have a clear shape, the fact that the monster is often an amalgam of things, is one of the things that is scary. Almost all the monsters that you come across in medieval literature are either they're really huge or really small, or they're a combination of things. And these combinations, especially human animal hybrids, these cross categories. They threaten. So is it an animal? Is it a man? Is it a manimal? Uh, and because of it's the way it turns its back on the normal, the status quo. Well, you don't know what it's going to do. It's unpredictable. And that's also scary to people. So that's why the blob itself is a great example, because there's this one scene that since I first saw it in my grandma's house in St. Louis when I was a little kid, that just stuck with me forever. And it's a scene of this old dude sees a meteor fall. He goes looking for it. He finds it. He's like, what the hey? What is this thing? And then he does what you do, and that's prod it with a stick. And that's what you do. And so as he prods it with the stick, it pops open. And inside there's this gelatinous globy glob or globby globe. And of course, he prods that with a stick and he gets it all over his pretty stick. And he does what you do when you have a globby globe. You kind of look at it and like, hey, this is really nifty. And so he's looking at it, and then it starts to get too close to his hand. So he flips it over, waiting for gravity to take effect. And it doesn't. The thing grabs his hand, and that just like shocked the shit out of me. It just totally shocked the shit out of me. It was just like, oh my God, I did not expect that. And that's exactly what Thesis 3 is talking about, is it does things that you don't expect. So this refusal, and this is a direct quote, this refusal to participate in the classificatory order of things is true of monsters generally. This is directly from Cohen. And this is something that I found interesting when I looked into Japanese monsters, is that even though they are more chaotic and lacking of rules, they still try to fall into these hierarchical categories because it's a big part of Japanese culture. That's why you have words like senpai and kohai, right? Like the people in the years before you, the people in the years after you, and there's always this huge push for us as humans to categorize the monster. Ever since like people first started traveling outside of their countries and traveling in the great beyond or whatever, and they start listing up all these monsters that they saw in their travels, and they put them in these bestiaries and they start categorizing them. And if you look in these old Chinese texts, they have Oni, and I mean they have these old monsters from their lore, and it's all categorized. Some have categorized in the animals, and then some are categorized in a separate category. And the Japanese ran with that idea, and they still put out these little books that have like a compendium of F14s or whatever, and they just I think it's human nature to try to categorize and put a name to something that we don't understand so that we feel like we can control it somehow. I was listening to a podcast called The Monster Professor, and they were talking about werewolves and how every werewolf movie, they have to establish the rules, like what can kill a werewolf. And it's like once you know that they're killable, then you can take a breath, and you can just, all right, now let's go get the stuff that we need to kill it. So yeah, like once you put a name to it, once you establish its rules, then you can have power over it. In the Blob's case, it was they figured out, well, old Steve McQueen figured out that it has a weakness to the cold. And so, they went from there. But the hard part was getting the armed force, getting the police and everybody and the adults to listen to them. That was the big challenge of the Blob. Well, that is Thesis 3. It's so fascinating. There's so many things you can go with, and this will tie into later theses about crossing categories, crossing boundaries. And so we will hear more about this. And of course, when I apply it to the comics, which I have mentioned, which are Demon Slayer, Kimetsu no Yaiba, and The Promised Neverland, both great comics in their way. Different, but they both use Oni. And so I thought it would be a good idea to try to apply monster theory, and I think it applies very well. We'll see. All right, we're getting there. We're getting there. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed listening to this video, and I will see you next time. See you in the funny papers.